Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Workers' Mic right here on 720 WGN. My name is Ken Edwards. I am with the Midwest Coalition of Labor. Sitting to my left is Ed Maher with the International Union of Operating Engineers. Good morning, Ed.
Hey, happy Sunday, Ken. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good. today.
What did you think about the Super Bowl?
The Super Bowl, great game.
It was a good game.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of comments from listeners about why do you hate Philadelphia fans so much? Because I seem to bring that up a lot, and I don't actually really hate Philadelphia fans. I'm just amused by the lack of sportsmanship.
Did you see there's a bunch of videos of Philadelphia fans smashing their televisions?
yeah. Well, they're emotional, and
yeah. I mean, it's their only TV, but they smashed it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You gotta love them.
Yeah.
I thought it was a good game.
You've got a tie to Philadelphia, so
my son goes there, and he was disappointed. Of course, he blamed it on the refs. I don't think.
Of course, he did.
It didn't matter.
It went both ways. It always does.
Yeah, they were gonna. Philly was gonna lose. They lost momentum. But I will tell you this: I enjoyed the halftime show.
Yeah,
you liked it?
Yeah, I thought it was. I mean, like the halftime show, they're always like lip syncing. And I kind of like the way that Rihanna sort of leaned into, hey, I'm out here, I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
Everybody around me is dancing like crazy. I'm going to do some little dance moves, and I'm just going to kind of take it halfway easy up here and just own the stage. I thought it was great. It seemed to upset so many people.
Oh, my God.
I just don't get it.
I saw this on Facebook. They're just like, we needed that Chris Stapleton. He should have been the halftime show. Is this a bearded guy with a guitar? That's it?
And he was great, too.
I will say this, and I think you brought this up earlier. The commercials were, whatever. But
at least it was a good game. Usually you watch for the commercials.
Well, first of all,
at least we had a great game to watch.
Let me just say this. I lost every single bet I made.
Yeah.
It's the worst. But you made a point.
If you need me to buy you lunch, I can.
You made a point about Disney.
Yeah, Disney spent $7 million on a Super Bowl commercial trotting out Mary Poppins and the blue thing from Avatar and all of these, all their 100-year anniversary characters, but they did it 3 days after they laid off 7,000 people.
That is what does that come out to?
$1,000 a person.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
This $7 million. Hey, everybody, come to Disney. It's the greatest place on earth. It's magical. But, oh, yeah, we're going to lay off 7,000 people.
Right. I mean, I think it's just one of those things where the optics are really bad. If you lay off a whole bunch of people, because Super Bowl commercials, they spur a lot of talk, but I don't think anybody really sees a big jump in their business. Like an established brand like that doesn't see a big jump in their business because of a Super Bowl commercial. It's just it's an ego competition with big corporations.
I think it's all I can say is I think it's once again disingenuous for Disney to come out and say we're the happiest place on earth and it's magical and et cetera, when they got some guy dressed up as Goofy sweating his cojones off, if you will, in 90-degree weather for $13 an hour,
right?
And then make matters worse, they're going to lay off 7,000 people as well.
Well, they have a contract fight at the parks right now, and I don't know all the details of it, but I had just seen a video where some of the people who play characters in the park were talking about, what you see as a dancing Goofy character, but if you go in the break room, you just see workers who are broken down in tears because they're wearing these giant heads out in the hot Florida sun and these big dresses and whatever. So
what they need is they need the scabby version of Goofy, right? We used to dress up in rat suits, right, back in the day.
It would be pretty funny if all of a sudden a bunch of rats just showed up in Disney. People would just think it was like a Ratatouille kind of thing and just go about their business.
Disney's full of rats.
Don't feed the rats.
Who I think got a big spike in for the commercial was Jesus.
So there's a lot of talk about, and I forget the group that was behind that, but it was
actually Jesus.
Jesus.
He took out a commercial.
Man, I didn't know Jesus had that kind of money.
He saved
3 commercials.
Well, Jesus saves. You understand that, right? Good one.
That's not terrible.
Thank you. I just made that up.
Yeah.
I will tell you, I thought the commercials. I don't care what you say. I thought the commercials were effective. I liked them.
Yeah.
The Jesus ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's something different.
It didn't take a side, and it just said, why is everybody fighting all the time?
I got to say, I think just based on your reaction to this, I think those commercials did have the intended effect.
What does this have to do with workers?
Let's get back to workers, Ken.
Jesus was a carpenter.
Jesus was a carpenter. So You were out on assignment last week, but did you
Yeah,
listen?
driving all over the Midwest. I did listen to the to the show, and I got to tell you, it was fantastic. Bob Bruno just knocked it out of the park, as did you and Phil. I thought it was really interesting. And it got me thinking, and I think maybe we'll talk about this in the next segment, but it really got me thinking about labor education.
Yeah.
And, maybe there's a better way to educate the masses, if you will, or young folks, et cetera. So, when we come back, if you don't mind, I would like to spend a couple minutes chatting about some ideas to follow up what you and Bob Bruno and Phil discussed, if that's okay.
For sure. I mean, I think one of the things we're going to get into in the next segment in a big way is a new state law from Iowa that is sort of inviting children back into factories and mines. It's sort of a rollback of child labor protections, which is unbelievable. We'll get into that, but
yeah.
To your point, though, Ken, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, because one of the things that Bob said last week was that University of Illinois is one of only a couple universities in the country that still has a labor education program. So in unions, and the reason that we had him on the show was just to talk about how important labor history is to the current economy, to American history.
Right.
And unions in other states have passed laws to to add labor history to states' curriculums, where something's got to be taught at some point at a certain grade level.
Yep.
But as Bob was saying, I mean, if that were to happen, there just aren't enough educators to do it, to actually go out to schools.
I have some thoughts about that. So let's
take a break. Yeah.
Let's take a quick break. You're listening to the Workers' Mic right here on 720 WGN. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to the Workers' Mic right here on 720 WGN. I'm Ken. He's Ed. There's Ed. He's right there.
Right over here.
Yeah. Hey, we talked real briefly just now about the last week's episode, and forgot to mention that if you want to listen to it or watch it, you can literally just Google it on YouTube, The Workers' Mic, and there it is. And you'll see Bob Bruno and all the kind of cool stuff that he had to say.
Yeah, there's a handful of past shows, and once this show is over on the radio, it'll be posted on YouTube. So check that out for sure. We've got a really talented group that put it together for us, and so it's very well done.
Da Vinci Street Productions. Look them up.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very, very high tech.
Going places.
Yeah, that's right. So in talking about the education, it got me thinking, and Bob said that there are not a lot of labor education programs left in the country. Right?
For sure. I think he said that there were like 2 large ones. It's been my experience, you can't even find universities that have a single professor.
And so once again, labor continuing to be its best kept secret.
Yeah.
I was thinking, and let me ask you what you think about this idea. That online thing called Khan Academy.
Oh, yeah.
Where you can learn about whatever you want.
I use it to be prepared for when my 12-year-old daughter asks me for help with her math homework. So I'm prepared when she comes to me, and I look like I know how to do math. But I only know because of Khan Academy.
That's super smart.
It got us through the pandemic for sure.
I love it. So I was thinking, why couldn't labor put together a series of online courses, classes, lectures, webinars, whatever you want to call it, that literally goes from soup to nuts and talks about, unions, what they mean, labor history, and just start with whatever. Start with labor history way back in the day and move it all the way through, current times. Number one, that's one idea. And the second idea I had was...
He's just giving out his ideas for free on the internet. So,
well, actually...
Ken will never be a rich man.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. I have an ex-wife. But I have, as I'm saying, Deirdre Darnell, who is our wonderful MCL communications director.
Shout out to Deirdre.
Yep, who's doing a great job. Also communications director for the Chicago District Council Laborers. Deirdre, this is a assignment for you, is to make this happen.
Saving yourself a phone call?
Yeah, seeing if she's listening. But I wonder, I bet you can get a grant for this. But I was thinking, so labor history, right? Bob said, and I remember obviously 150 forces you to take that class.
Yeah, I mean, as I said to Bob, coming in and taking classes when you join, we're not just trying to teach people how to be skilled equipment operators, good operating engineers. We want them to be good union members as well.
And why can a local like 150 or the building trades, why can they force that class?
I mean, there's, again, as we talked about before, and I've said many times, there's a lot of demand to get into our apprenticeship program because, as we always talk about, the wages are great, the benefits are great. People want to do, and you operate heavy equipment. It's a job that a lot of our members have a lot of fun doing.
Yep.
And so, yeah, if you want this to be your career, you need to understand the history of this local, the history of the people who did this work before you, why you have the wages that you do, why you have the protections that you do. So you have a little sense of ownership and some skin in the game to protect it and leave it better for the next generation, which is, central to the labor movement.
And I think something that other unions should start to do. But that being said, the building trades have one advantage, and that is they put people to work. Right, and there's a high demand to get into the building trades. So you're not going to say, "Oh, I'd love to join the operators, and make $50 an hour, but I don't want to take that labor class." That's not happening. You're taking the class,
right?
So, but unions that for example, grocery store workers or things of that nature, they're already there. You can't force them to take a class. So I was thinking that we would put these classes online and just make them available, and teach people. Let's talk about these nascent unions that are independent unions. Some of them have literally no idea what they're doing, right?
For sure.
And wouldn't it be great if there was an actual place that they could go and go like, how do you bargain? What's a permissive subject to bargaining? What's a mandatory subject to bargaining? What's an information request?
And I mean, perhaps even a track for folks who don't know anything about the labor movement,
Absolutely.
Who just want to understand. Again,
Labor 101.
Yeah, what Bob was in here talking about last week was, why is this history important to understanding what's going on in the world today? And I think that it really, really is. So I mean, just basics like that.
And then make maybe like taking on the kind of thrust today, which is 30 million people, like you said last week, would join a union if they could. The unions have a giant positive. Whatever it is, what do you call that?
Favorability rating.
Favorability rating.
People like unions,
right? So maybe now's the time to put this stuff, and with social media and the advent of very quick TikTok and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube and things like that, that there's a place for everybody to learn.
Right.
So
people need to learn, because what happens when people forget? Leading into one of the big topics of our show today.
We go backwards.
Yeah, we go backwards. Like the state of Iowa, which is has already passed, and the governor is going to sign a law.
So that passed.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
I think it passed.
Okay,
I might be wrong on that. Whatever. Google it.
Yeah.
Anyway, this law has broad support, and if it hasn't already passed, it's expected to pass.
What law?
It's a law that will allow children as young as age 14 to work in industrial settings. If you get a waiver, you could have children working in mines, construction sites, heavy industrial settings, factories, as young as age 14. And this is being done because these facilities can't find people to do the work.
Which is nonsense, by the way. What happened to all these undocumented workers taking our jobs and documented workers taking our jobs? Like, well, what happened to that?
If you want to stop undocumented workers from taking jobs, you just have to pull your kids out of school and put them in coal mines. But this is so backwards, and let me sort of give a little bit of history to, you're familiar with, if you're a kid in high school, like 15, 14 years old, and you want to drop out, you can't. Remember, there used to be truant officers.
That's right.
You have to go to school until you're 16.
Yeah.
And the history behind that is that in the South, let's say within maybe 100 years ago, there were children that were taking the jobs of uneducated, unskilled workers. And so they couldn't provide for their families because children were doing their jobs. And so they pushed for a law that would require children to go to school until they were 16, clearing them out of the labor market so they could keep their jobs.
So it wasn't like to protect the children. It was to protect their own jobs not being done by kids.
Yeah, it served two purposes. But a big part of the law, the push for this law that was successful in the South, was driven by that.
And I know, obviously, unions were a large
100%.
part in getting kids out of the coal mines and out of working in these horrible conditions, right?
Right, but the reasons behind passage of child labor laws
Yeah.
were different in the North than they were in the South.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
And what drove it in the South was grown adults having to compete with children for unskilled jobs.
So we're back to that in Iowa, I guess, huh?
Right, but let me ask you this: would you hire a 14-year-old electrician to change wiring in your house? Would you feel comfortable with a 14-year-old working in like a mine or like a poultry processing plant? This is insane that this is actually happening and that it's being supported, and it's starting to spread to other states. In Ohio, they're talking about, I don't think it's the same exact law, but they're talking about rolling back child labor protections.
And all this under the guise of we can't get enough workers, which is just, by the way, absolutely nonsense.
Right.
There's no worker shortage. There's a wage shortage.
Yeah, there's a shortage of workers that will do this kind of stuff for $12 an hour.
I guess. So what are they going to do? Like, hey, Timmy, get into that beef packing plant. I'd rather go to school. It's like, Timmy, we need the money. I thought you work in construction, Dad. Well, Timmy, I work in a right-to-work state, and I only make $12 an hour.
They could make like a remake of A Christmas Carol with, little tiny Tim walking around with a bum leg because he hurt himself, chopping up turkeys in the turkey factory.
Timmy, kill that cow. I don't want to kill the cow. Timmy, kill that goddamn cow.
Yeah.
It's funny. It sounds so absurd, but the fact of the matter is, like you said, that states are literally trying to pass laws right now, and they're going to pass, by the way,
right,
that allow kids to go work in horrible industrial settings.
Yeah, I mean, I think I got my first job when I was maybe 15. I'm absolutely in favor of
selling weed.
I worked at a hardware store.
Yep.
So, and I'm fully supportive of young people getting jobs to, if you want to go to the movies, like you can pay for that. It's an important thing, and I'll always value. I've never, gone without a job since I was 15, but I wouldn't have worked in a mine. And if I wanted to work in a mine, my parents would have, had the sense to say no. And to think that state leaders are pushing this as though it's a good thing.
You think the state? You think this?
And this isn't the South. This isn't the '60s. This is happening in Iowa,
which is
right now,
right next door.
Yeah,
horrible right to work.
People in
state,
Iowa
right?
can hear this because WGN's antenna is so powerful. I mean, let me just say,
it is
very powerful antenna.
And we're the #1 show in the Midwest, so a lot of people are listening to this. But hey, Chuck Grassley, would you send your kid, your 14-year? Well, you're too old to have a 14-year-old.
Yeah, I think he's about 90.
Yeah, okay, but let's legislators in Iowa or any place else thinking about this. How about this? You send your kid first. Right, yeah. You send your 14-year-old, 15-year-old into a meat packing plant. And by the way, I've toured one of those things. They are really, really rough. And I mean really rough.
Yeah, those are not pleasant jobs.
Oh, my God. And I was joking about killing the cow, but they're killing cows in there.
Right.
I mean, where do you think the cows go to die?
I mean, I think we all understand that there's something that happens between the cow eating the grass and the cow getting to the dinner table.
You ever see a wild cow?
A wild cow?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd say it was wild. It was standing out. I don't know if anybody had a leash on it. It might have been wild, but it wasn't acting very wild.
I don't think there's such a thing as a wild cow.
Well, they don't run around. You think of a wild thing like running around. Cows just don't do that.
Okay. Well, maybe because Timmy's going to kill him.
Ken learns something new every day.
Every single day. So here, what can we do? And we, I mean, the working class. Well, number one, if you're a parent, don't send your kids to work at 14. Just that simple. Don't send them. You don't have to send them. And if you need the money that bad, there must be another way to get it, right? Drive for Uber, get a second job, but don't send your kids into a beef packing plant or a construction site. And you want to hear the topper of this, Ed?
What's that?
The absolute cherry on top of this. What do you think is in that law to help the kids if they get hurt and or die on the job?
Nothing. One of the biggest criticisms.
Did you say nothing?
There are no protections.
Not only no protections, you can't sue.
Yeah.
Like, there's literally a protection for the company, not the kid.
Right.
That if, God forbid, Timmy loses his leg, or the mad cow. Remember mad cow disease? Mad cow bites Timmy's arm off, right? So can one-armed Timmy, can he sue? No, actually, he can't sue. Why?
Sorry about that one-armed, one-legged Timmy. Things are going very bad for old Timmy, and we're against it here at the Workers' Mic.
We are against it, but they're literally written into the statute that they cannot sue if they get hurt on the job. So workers' comp, right? Yeah. That's out the window for them. It's just this is mind-boggling to me. So the myth of we don't need unions anymore, right?
There's no kids in the mines.
There's no kids in the mines. Well, guess what?
Kids are coming back to the mines.
Welcome back, children.
Yeah,
right. We need workers in the mines, and you're small enough, you can fit down in that hole. What a disgusting, horrible thing, and shame on anybody, any politician that is proposing these things. I've read an article that even Republicans are disgusted about it.
For sure, as they should be.
As absolutely they should be.
We've got to take a quick break, but we'll be back. Stick with us for more Workers' Mic right here on 720 WGN.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Workers' Mic right here on 720 WGN. My name is Ken Edwards from the Midwest Coalition of Labor. Sitting next to me is Ed Maher from the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150. How's it going?
What's happening, Ken?
Well, we a lively conversation in this earlier segment, and turning to continuous dangerous jobs,
things that shouldn't happen in 2023.
Yeah, and I think it's not just in Ohio, but I think yesterday or a couple of days ago there was another train derailment near Detroit. Actually,
I didn't hear about that.
There's been like 4 or 5 over the past few days. The one, of course, that's gotten the most attention.
The one with poison gas that's creating a toxic black cloud that's killing fish and pets.
You know what they should do is send kids in there to clean it up.
Well, if it was in Iowa, or if they could get that law passed in Ohio, they would probably send the kids in there.
It's probably on its way. Yeah. So there was a train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio.
Yeah, a vinyl product that's extremely toxic. I think they evacuated like 5,000 people and then blew up the train.
Oh, they blew up the train? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think it was a controlled demolition or a controlled disposal, they called it.
And so these chemicals are obviously in the air, right? They're leaking probably into the ground and groundwater, and they're killing fish. And it's my understanding in reading some of the backstory on this is that not only were the train workers fighting, the rail workers fighting for, increased wages and days off and things like that.
Yeah.
But they said that their jobs were dangerous in that there were understaffing, and things were not being maintained, and just
those rail workers are talking about it now, saying, it's hard to say that this could have been prevented, certainly if the things that they had asked for, but they were looking for additional staffing, manpower on these trains.
Right.
And to think that you've got a locomotive filled with things that are this toxic, extremely toxic, and there's 2 people on the train, and the workers want one more person.
Of
and
course.
In this case, it was Norfolk Southern Railroad is saying no, and they're profiting. I mean, all over the news lately, there's been talk of the insane profits of all these railroads,
right?
Mostly because of the contract that they just had forced down their workers' throats. But in this case, they're shuttling toxic chemicals, unsafely, and still making these enormous profits because they just don't have enough people out there trying to make sure that they can do this safely.
And I don't understand the rationale, Ed, and maybe somebody out there can explain it to me. And that is,
I think they want to make more money.
That's all it is, right? I mean,
the simplest
do you really not want to
explanation.
hire one other person? Because look, at some point, right, this toxic spill is going to cost the railroad money. Now, graciously, they offered $25,000 to the town, which
for the 5,000 people that got evacuated, so it's $5
$5 a person.
Yeah,
and of course they said that's a misnomer. We offered that money. It wasn't to offset families. We're actually giving each family $1,000.
Okay,
so $1,000
to replace or bury their pet who died, and maybe go help a little toward buying the next
Yeah,
dog.
or get the other lung that you're going to need
Right.
now, and you should chop off the third ear that you grew because of the toxic spill.
Yeah, they go back to like, you can drink the water, everything's fine now. Okay.
Didn't they say that in Flint too?
I think they did.
Yeah, drink the water. Well, how about this? You go first.
Drink it, just don't put it near an open flame. You can drink it as long as you don't have a mouthful of fire.
Don't swallow it.
Yeah.
I mean, but once again, these are dangerous jobs. They're jobs that require an amazing amount of skill and ability. It's not just like you show up, get on the train, and the train moves.
Right.
And these kind of accidents, in my humble opinion, can and should be avoided.
Well, I think seeing that this can happen and has happened, steps have to be taken to, if you have to put more people on the trains, then that has to be done.
Right.
It doesn't, shareholders be damned. It doesn't really matter, whether this is going to impact a stock price or, the value going to a CEO, because everybody lives near some railroad. And if this is going on, I think this is opening the eyes to a lot of folks that, that train that you're sitting there waiting when you're on your way to work, you don't know what's in there. But it turns out it could be something that if that train goes off the rails, it could kill you.
Imagine that, though. I mean, that this is being driven by stock price. Like, who cares? This is where, unfortunately, capitalism falls down, right? If the stock market, which, by the way, is not an indicator of the economy, the stock market is geared towards making rich people richer. Right, the average working class person does not have a $10 million stock portfolio.
Yeah, I think the most recent numbers were that 50% of all American workers own zero stock.
Imagine that.
Right.
Yeah. So if that's what this is being driven by, and you're not paying attention to safety, or you're short shrifting, or you're cutting corners, or things like that, and accidents happen because of it, well, shame on you. And there needs to be, the government needs to step in and fine the crap out of these companies. I mean, or you lose your license to practice. Like, if you're a lawyer and you commit malpractice and blah, 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 and you do this, that, and the other thing, you lose your license, right?
Yeah.
If you're a doctor, you can't practice, if you don't, hit certain benchmarks and, make sure that you're not killing people.
Right.
Right.
Well, I think this is an interesting situation. You raise a good point, because if the government has the authority to step in with the railroad companies and say, hey, workers,
here's your contract.
You don't want this contract, but you have to take it.
Right.
Then the government should, on the other side of the coin, be able to say, hey, you caused a reckless accident that endangered a lot of people. We want to make sure that doesn't happen again. So you're going to commit some money to a fund. You're going to change the way that you do this, this, and this. So what do you think the odds are of that happening?
I think that, number one, I think they're slim to none. Number two, that even when they do this, and you've seen, first of all, there'll be a lawsuit, right? Probably.
Yeah.
It'll take.
Oh, for sure.
It'll take 30 years.
I mean, the waterways locally are poisoned. There's thousands of dead fish.
Right.
People's pets are already dying. So there's going to be a lot more fallout with humans. I mean, who knows what
the effect is going to be?
You're going to have to wait some time to find out. I think.
So there'll be a lawsuit. It'll take forever, and they'll pay pennies on the dollar, right?
Right.
Because that's what these class action lawsuits, they don't really make a difference, and they certainly don't make a difference to the bottom line of the company. So, in order to be effective, and we talked about this, in terms of labor parlance as well, where there's a slap on the wrist. It's the same thing here, Ed, and that is, if you want to hit this company, right, for causing this accident or making sure that other companies think twice about short shrifting, then you really, really have to hit them. Like, you're out of business for the next 5 years. And by the way, free market, somebody else is going to take that.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, nobody is more fierce competitors than the railroads against each other.
Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, throughout American history, railroads just try to gobble each other up.
Like Thomas the Train.
Yeah, I mean, let's take this down a couple levels for you. Like Thomas the Train, just imagine if Thomas wasn't smiling, but he had a sad face because he was full of poison and he fell off the tracks and exploded,
And then Bob the Builder, who was only making $10 an hour and, got cancer.
It was 14 years old.
Bob the Builder's son had to
Timmy
go,
the Builder.
Timmy the Builder, good one.
Yeah.
He had to go clean up the mess.
Yeah. Well,
I like it.
These are the shows that our children, children will be watching one day unless we do something to stop it.
We really need to do something to stop it. And speaking of politicians that might actually do something, I just read something about Bernie Sanders, who,
Yeah.
Love him or hate him, the guy's got it. His heart's in the right place.
Yeah, he's not trying to get rich. He's not trying to rip people off or
right?
do
Yeah.
something to his own ends.
Yeah, his heart's in the right place. And so Bernie, he must have a new Senate assignment. I'm not sure exactly what it is because I only skimmed the article. I can't be reading everything, Ed.
You're a busy guy.
I am. But he asked Howard Schultz, who is the
CEO of Starbucks or former CEO.
I think he's currently the CEO again. I think he was back, whatever, to come and testify before Congress. And you know what the thrust of the testimony was going to be?
Let's hear it.
Labor law violations.
Oh, like you've been found to have violated labor laws. Tell us more about that.
Yeah,
Okay.
and why are you continuing to do it?
I like it.
Why are you union busting? And you should be held accountable, not only, with your posting of, something behind the bathroom door, but maybe to the American public. And maybe a spotlight needs to be shined on union busting. And we're going to have some discussions about union busting in general. But he specifically, Bernie, asked Howard Schultz to come and testify before Congress, which Howard Schultz said, no, thank you.
I know, but there's got to be some sort of additional ability because right now, if you violate labor law, you can have the NLRB, National Labor Relations Board, investigate you. It can take months or years to come to a resolution,
Absolutely.
and the penalty is you have to put up a piece of paper on a bulletin board that says, we violated the law and we won't do it again. We're sorry. It says we won't do it again. But there's no reason for people to really care. If you're a company and you can stop a union from forming, save millions of dollars for the company in your eyes, and all you have to do is get a slap on the wrist from the board, that's a huge win. So
yeah, and I think people need to know that,
Right.
And we've talked about it again, and you and I are familiar with this. They call it S-house posting, by the way, and that is literally, you get slapped on the wrist and you post a notice that it says exactly what you just said. We won't do it again. We're sorry. Or not even we're sorry. We just won't do it again. And they post it on the back of the break room door or the bathroom door or someplace where people are not going to see it. And by the way, even if they do, who cares? The only people that see it are the actual workers themselves.
it's written by a government agency, so nobody can, very few people will understand what it actually means.
And
what's happened.
that's the penalty for breaking
I know.
labor law.
Yeah.
So you rob a bank, you're going to jail, right? You
Rob your workers, you gotta,
put a notice up on the board, right? Fire your workers illegally. You're not going to jail. You're putting up a notice on the board. We used to joke, like, what are they going to do? Put you in labor board jail? I mean, I'm sure that the management thinks the same way.
Right. I mean, I think if what you're saying is what Bernie's after, having a company who repeatedly violates labor law and say, hey, here you are under subpoena if necessary.
Yeah.
Starbucks violated its workers' rights in these cases, and we're here to sort of ask you questions about that, but we're not asking you whether you did it. We're saying you did it. We're establishing that as a fact,
Right.
and we want you to answer questions about it. I think the public damage and the humiliation that would come to Starbucks because of that would probably be a driver to have other companies maybe be a little bit more, put some teeth into this, which is what you and I have said for a long time on this show and for many years before. But,
labor law needs some teeth.
yeah, I mean, people who violate their workers' rights have to be held accountable simply, and they have to be held, accountable in a very meaningful way.
And I think that it's not, at this point, you see Bernie trying to do it.
Yeah.
You hear President Biden, he gave some short shrift to it in his speech the other day. But at some point, the masses, meaning consumers, workers, families, they need to hold the companies accountable.
Yeah.
And how do they do that? Economically, shopping places that are more friendly, going to Costco instead of Walmart, for example, going to the union shop instead of the non-union shop, buying American, et cetera, speaking with their wallets.
Right.
So, just a thought. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back to wrap it up right here on the Workers' Mic, 720 WGN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Workers' Mic right here on 720 WGN. We were just chatting about corporate, irresponsibility, if you will. And I just read in the news that Tesla is looking at an organizing drive. I think they've had one or two over the years, and of course they've gone nowhere. And I'm sure they union busted, et cetera.
For sure.
But recently, some workers, I don't know where it was.
There were some pamphlets being handed out. I think there was clear indicators that workers were talking about forming a union at one of Tesla's factories in Buffalo.
Yeah, and I think it was actually under the auspices of Workers United as well, which did Starbucks.
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of neat,
Yeah, but Tesla had a quick response to that within a couple of days, I think.
What was that?
They called for unscheduled performance reviews, and they fired like 4 times as many people as usual. But they laid off, I think it was 35 workers that were all sort of behind this in Buffalo, and they within days got brought in for performance reviews, rated as poor performers, and all fired. So,
and then what's gonna happen to Tesla right now? Nada.
Yeah, probably
nothing.
Probably very little. But
they got a recall for their self-driving cars. Like
I'm not ready. I'm not ready for the self-driving cars.
I'm not ready for the self-driving.
That's worse
either,
than the GPT on Microsoft. If anybody has tried using Bing as their search engine with this new AI search function, don't do it. That thing is evil.
Skynet evil, like Terminator.
Yeah, like
evil.
I'm not a robot.
I think we should have the Chat GPT on next week as a guest.
That is an absolutely fantastic idea.
All right,
We're going to do that.
It's a done deal.
Yeah,
back to Tesla for a second. This self-driving, I think there was 300,000 quote unquote recall, but they really needed an update, and they're saying that it wasn't working right, accidents, et cetera, and my thinking is this: that if Tesla can make a car that drives itself, maybe they can make a car that builds itself. They don't need any workers whatsoever.
Right.
How about this? If all the workers sat home and said, "Oh, you know what? You make a car that drives itself. How about this? Build it yourself."
Well, Elon Musk has talked about their humanoid robot. It's a part of Tesla. It's a part of Tesla's business model, and that's sort of like the next phase in.
Well, let's get down to it. Start it now. Everybody in Tesla walk out today and let Tesla make their own cars. See how good quickly that works.
Terminator 2. It could actually happen.
T2.
Yeah.
T
2023.
So let's talk about something local for a second. That we've touched on in the past, and that is the workers, the concession workers at the United Center.
Yes, the heroic concession workers who work for Levy. They're members of Unite Here, Local 1 here in Chicago. They've authorized a strike.
They haven't struck yet.
Right. They could at any time. The strike is authorized. I think 98% of their members voted to authorize that strike. They had a big rally at the United Center earlier this week, and there were hundreds and hundreds of people walking with signs and just kind of letting people that were showing up to the game know what was going on.
Yeah.
And again, I think as people become more aware that they're paying $10 for a beer and the person serving it to them is living in poverty.
Yeah. It's embarrassing.
It absolutely is. So
it's disgusting. Like look at the Super Bowl tickets. They were I forget how much they were. Like something insane. Like the average person basically can't go to the Super Bowl.
For sure. Oh, right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's not really any word at this time about progress. I think the sides of I can't really say what's going on, but
maybe we can have Unite Here come on the radio and talk about it next week if they're around. We would welcome that.
Yeah, I think so. I think it'd be interesting to talk to somebody who's involved with all this. But of course, we're hoping to see some progress on that for these.
Yeah,
workers.
I hope it doesn't come down to it. Right? Nobody wants to walk out on strike, because when you walk out on strike, you lose. You lose pay,
right.
And you have to physically, make up a decent amount of ground to make that money back. And sometimes you don't, and sometimes it takes years, but sometimes you have to take a stand to do it. At my son's school in Temple University, the graduate students are on strike. And you know what Temple did? They immediately stopped paying them, and they stopped the health insurance, and they took away their tuition reimbursement. Immediately,
right?
That's just talk about heavy-handed.
Yeah,
this is a learning institution, higher learning, blah blah blah. Well, that's what they did immediately.
So we'll see if we can follow up with the United Center story a little bit more next week, and maybe have a guest with us.
Okay.
But that's about all the time that we've got for this week. Before we leave, I did want to give a shout out to our listeners of the week. And that's
we have that?
We do, and there's 2 of them. It's not just one, it's 2. It's Sylvia and Renee Sellis. They are loyal listeners to the show. They love the show. They love WGN. So we just wanted to say thanks for listening.
That's nice.
And shout out to you.
Yeah, thank you.
And
what about YouTube?
Yeah, so if you are just tuning in or you missed a portion of the show, just remember that as soon as this show ends, as soon as you hear me finally stop talking, you can go to YouTube And you can look up the Workers' Mic, and there will be a video of this broadcast. You can listen to the whole thing, and we encourage you to do that. You can listen to back episodes as well. So Workers' Mic, the Workers' Mic on
And you
YouTube.
you can also hear it on WGN, correct?
Right, and Spotify. So
Yeah, you can't not listen to it.
right,
So listen to it.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it is the #1 show.
that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thanks,
Hey,
everybody.
Yeah, it's been a good time this week. We appreciate it. You've been listening to the Workers' Mic right here on 720 WGN. See you next week.